Well, good evening, everyone. We'll call to order the City of Salem Planning Commission meeting for July 5th, 2022. And Shelby, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine?
Here.
Commissioner Ickes?
Here.
Commissioner Fott?
Present.
Commissioner Goebel?
Here.
Commissioner Griggs is absent. Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Levin?
Here.
And Commissioner Slater?
Here.
We have quorum.
So consent calendar, I will make a motion to approve the minutes from the June 21st, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. Can I get a second on that? And sorry, before I do that, I need to ask the commissioners that were not in attendance if you all had a chance to review the minutes and would you be participating in the vote?
I did not.
I did not either. I will be abstaining.
Okay.
I will also be abstaining. I didn't see the entire thing.
Okay. Of the commissioners that are available, can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Ickes. And Shelby, would you call?
Commissioner Ickes?
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Augustine, Fott, and Heller abstain, and Griggs is absent.
So we're moving on to agenda item number 5, public hearings. Item 5.1 for a minor comprehensive plan change and zone change. I believe this is where I asked Shelby if she would read the criteria. Is that correct?
Correct. This is a public hearing to consider a minor comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number CPC ZC 22-05 for property located at 5536 Skyline Road South. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, Chapter 260.045B for land use designations. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Pamela Cole, and I am the case manager for this annexation and the concurrent comprehensive plan change and zone change, which you will be hearing tonight. I request that the staff report and attachments and the presentation be entered into the record. The subject property is proposed for annexation in case ANXC 749. Territory annexed into the city is automatically given the city comprehensive plan designation and zoning designation that's equivalent to the applicable county zoning designations as set forth in Table 260-1, unless several conditions apply, one or more of the following. One is that the petitioner requests a new comprehensive plan designation or zone designation, and that's the case tonight. The applicant is proposing to change from developing residential to multifamily residential in the comprehensive plan, and from Marion County UT5 urban transition 5 acres zoning in the county to RM1 zoning upon annexation. The subject property for the case is outlined here in black. The annexation will be presented to City Council for approval. We haven't set a date for that yet. And some of you may know I'm retiring on July 15th, so I will not be carrying forward with the annexation hearing, and other staff will be taking care of that part of the case. The red dashed line here indicates the city limits. Skyline Road is a minor arterial street, and Davis Road, which is south of the subject property, is a collector. The property contains single-family dwellings and accessory buildings currently. Nearby properties mostly contain single-family dwellings, and there are some large acreage lots that have some agricultural uses. Just to the north at Maplewood Drive, southeast, at the top of the map, there are some townhouses and also apartments at the intersection. As I mentioned, the subject property is currently designated developing residential, and most of the surrounding properties are either developing residential, shown in green on the map, or single-family residential, shown in yellow. We do have a few at that intersection that are designated multifamily. And similarly, the Marion County zoning of UT5 is shown here in brown, so that applies to the subject property and other properties east and west. To the south, we have one property zoned RA in the city and some north of Skyline that are still zoned RA, and others in the city are zoned RS, single family residential. And the proposed comprehensive plan designation applies to the whole property. It's multifamily residential. And the zoning proposed by the applicant is RM1, multiple family residential 1. We did not receive any comments from Sunny Slope Neighborhood Association for the record, but the applicant did have a neighborhood association meeting with Sunny Slope and explained in their written statement that there were some questions about stormwater. I haven't received any written comments from citizens on the case, and there's no homeowners association. For public and private agency comments, Salem Kaiser Schools estimates up to 5 elementary, 3 middle school, and 3 high school students would be accommodated by potential development on the property, and they'd be eligible for transportation to their schools. Public Works indicated that there's no significant impact on the existing transportation system. An urban growth area preliminary declaration may be required, and the site-specific requirements will be addressed at the site plan review stage, or if there's a land division, also at the land division stage. Fire department had no concerns, and they'll address access and water supply at the time of development. Building and safety also had no comments. Staff found that the proposed requests for the RM1 zoning and the corresponding comprehensive plan designation do meet the criteria. It's a logical extension of the nearby residential uses, and infrastructure can be provided. The RM1 designation would allow townhouses or cottage clusters or other low density multifamily compatible with the single family development in the area. The new zoning would address the multifamily housing deficit in the city and would allow a variety of housing that would meet needs, increase buildable lands for multifamily residential, and help to meet population growth. And staff recommends that the proposed comprehensive plan map change to multifamily and the proposal for RM1 zoning be approved contingent upon the corresponding multifamily designation. That's all I have for this presentation. Of course, I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you, Pamela. Short and sweet and pretty straightforward. Are there any questions of staff? Mrs. Goble.
Thank you. Thank you, Pamela. Is this the last time we'll get to have the pleasure of seeing you at a planning commission meeting for your retirement?
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I just wanted to ask a kind of a more of a point of order question. I don't want this to be seen at all as like any sort of lack of support for the proposal, but more broadly speaking, I think I kind of want to get more clarity on as we move towards the pending approval of our Salem plan. I guess my question is, so far, as long as I've been on the planning commission, we've sort of addressed any sort of application for multifamily residential, which I do think serves the purposes of this site and meets the needs of this area of the community. But broadly speaking, when we see applications for multifamily residential, it's been addressed as sort of this like, critical, like crisis level deficit of multifamily housing, something that's like almost always, highly needed and a better use of the land than whatever it was zoned as before. So now as we're moving towards the approval of our Salem and meeting that deficit and even exceeding that deficit, I guess my question is, like, as we see these proposals come through, like, are we going to be shifting our focus, I guess, or kind of needing to reorient that perspective from being this really critical need to, okay, now multifamily housing is filled, we can be a little bit more, I guess, picky or critical about which areas we see fit the needs for multifamily housing. So in the case of, weighing the pros and cons of that, I guess, can you speak to that a little bit, just because we're getting closer to approving that, or to seeing the approval of the RCM plan?
I think that would be a more appropriate question for Lisa to answer, because she's going to be here guiding the process after I'm gone and is more heavily involved in our Salem, of course.
Thank you, Pamela.
Thanks.
Sure, I'm happy to. That's a great question. We've talked about that internally. Like you said, all of the requests to rezone to multifamily, we can really rely on the fact that we have that identified deficit when evaluating it. Although, there were many requests for zone changes before we did our H&A, so before we knew we had that deficit. And I assume there will be more after, like, people identify properties for multifamily that we didn't necessarily identify. And so I think then it will be up to the Planning Commission to consider factors that are in the comp plan for good location for multifamily. So, is it near a school? Is it near a park? Is it served by transit? That kind of thing. So it'll be, I think you're right. We won't be able to just say, oh, we need multifamily land and we have to meet this threshold. So then every property is good for multifamily if they want to build it. It'll really be more about, is it the right location? I think the commission could also consider in the future that although we've identified and redesignated the acreage that we need, it doesn't necessarily, that's all private property. So we don't know between now and 2035, the planning horizon, that all of those properties will actually be developed, right? Some of them may never be developed for multifamily if the property owner hangs on to it for a really long time or just has no desire to develop it. So just because we've met like what I would consider kind of the minimum threshold of acreage needed doesn't mean that other land being converted wouldn't be good or needed for our community. And something that we will continue to do is look at how many units are produced per year. And so in the H&A, it says, we need these many units with acreage. There's also units over the planning period. And so if you divide that by year, we're kind of looking at, are we getting that kind of number of units built every year? And if not, that might be another reason to say, well, if this person wants to build on this property, even though we hadn't previously picked it for multifamily, this would be a good property to say yes, because they're going to put those units and make sure we get a certain amount of units per year. There also will be in the near future a housing production strategy that the city has to do. It's like a next step after housing needs analysis. And through that work, we'll look more about how are we helping to make sure those units are built, even though we have the land, right? It's the next step would be making sure that they're produced. So we'll be working on that as well. So that was a really long answer to say, yes, great question. And we'll have to work through it after the H&A is adopted.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
I see a question by Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. Just to build on Commissioner Goebel's question, Lisa, do you know how many units per year that actually turns out to be?
It's 275. That's not multifamily. I think that's all units. I have to go back and look. So we're starting, the only reason I even have that number in my head is last week we were working on putting together something to track the units. But the city's working on they're calling it a scorecard or something for all different things that the city does, like metrics, and then putting it on the website so people can see, like, if you have a goal for how quickly you review a permit, how often are we meeting that goal, et cetera. And one of them is just how many units are permitted per year, per quarter. I think it was 275 per quarter, actually, not per year. Yeah, I was like, that's a low number. It
Gotcha.
was per
Okay, that
quarter.
makes a
Yeah,
little bit more sense.
yeah, 275 of
Okay.
all housing types per quarter. And I think last quarter we met that. So we're just starting to do the data and
Right.
putting that dashboard together. So.
Okay. Well, I will probably follow up during your administrative report with just one more question, but I don't need to do it now.
Great.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions of staff. I have a question, Pamela, about the reference for the potential roadway, future roadway. Is there, I know the city has future road plans. Is there any roadway that is the city has identified that is going to be impacting this property?
Not at this time, but with the development occurs, then we're going to have to look at spacing for streets, block length, and decide if that's something that's relevant to the proposal. So
Okay.
if Public Works determines that the spacing along Skyline for the local streets that connect to Skyline is lacking and that we need a street in this location, then that's going to be something that comes up with either the urban growth area preliminary declaration or with the development process with the site plan or land division.
Okay. So would any of the language that's currently in these conditions permanently restrict and designate any land for future roadway if it wasn't deemed necessary?
These are just findings. There's not a condition regarding the street. So it's flexible for the future.
So I don't have any further questions. Shall we move on to the applicant? Would the applicant like to speak? And you get 15 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Brittany Randall of Brand Land Use. For the record, my address is 12150 Jefferson Highway 99E Southeast in Jefferson. I'm here presenting on behalf of the applicant this evening. Thank you, Pamela, for your thorough review of our application as always. And this is bittersweet for me, knowing this is probably our last presentation and project together. So you can ride off into the sunset. So I actually wanted to focus on the fact that our Salem is being adopted, and we will see this influx of approximately 300 or so acres of multifamily designated land, and how this, 1.9-ish acres fits into that. And I think that we have done a thorough and complete job of describing how we meet each of the goals of the comprehensive plan for multifamily. So I believe that our written statement, attachment number 54, is in your packet. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that. But we did some pretty extensive research on historically how lands are treated in the city, and of course, what the requirements are for multifamily land. And I think that we have shown that this is still needed even with the influx of the 300 acres, and that this area is kind of desperately in need of that mix of housing types for different income and interest levels. So with that, I will say I'm available for any questions.
Any questions of the applicant? Seeing none, we'll move on. Any further questions of staff? Okay. Would somebody care to make a motion?
I will make a motion here if that's okay. Are we keeping the record open or voting today?
I believe now, Shelby and I were going over the procedure. Shelby, was it at the before I closed the hearing that I asked the applicant about?
Yeah, so you would, you'd ask the applicant if they want to continue the hearing or leave the record open, and then you'd close the hearing, and then there'd be a motion.
Got it. Okay. So just one more time back to you, Brittany. Is there any reason that you would like the hearing continued or the record left open?
No,
Okay,
thank you.
I will close the hearing, gavel down. And now can we have a motion for vote?
Okay, well, I will move adoption of staff minor comprehensive plan change and zone change case number CPC CZ 2205.
And do we have a second?
Second.
So we have
I'll second.
motion by Slater, second by Goebel. Any comment? I like it. Let's go to a vote. Shelby, would you take the vote?
Commissioner Augustine.
Aye.
Commissioner Akis.
Aye.
Commissioner Fott.
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel.
Aye.
Commissioner Heller.
Aye.
Commissioner Levin.
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
So we get to move on to agenda item number 5.2. Shelby, would you read the criteria for this one?
This is a public hearing to consider a minor comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number CPC ZC 22-06 for a property located on the 3800 block of Mart Avenue Southeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, Chapter 260.045B for land use designations. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you. And Pamela, you have the floor again.
Okay. Thank you, Brittany, for your kind words, if you're still on board. All right. Good evening, commissioners. Again, I'm Pamela Cole, case manager for the concurrent comprehensive plan change and zone change you're hearing tonight that is associated with an annexation. I request that the staff reports, attachments, and presentation be entered into the record. In this case, the subject property is also proposed for annexation, and I realized when I looked at this slide that I probably gave you the wrong annexation case number on the previous slide, so please disregard that. It was just an error left over from a previous application. So no case number, annexation case number in the presentation. The territory in this case is currently designated single-family residential in the comprehensive plan and zoned single-family residential in Marion County. The proposals are commercial in the comprehensive plan and retail commercial or CR zoning to go along with that. Again, this is a case where the petitioner specifically requested the new designations. The subject property shown here in the little black outline is just east of I-5 and west of Lancaster Drive Southeast. And the red dashed line indicates the city limits. Of course, Lancaster is a major arterial and Mart itself is a local street. The property is currently vacant. Nearby properties on Mart contain single-family dwellings, but there are a few apartments to the north and then businesses along Lancaster Drive Southeast. The property to the south is owned by the same entity as the Santiam Cinema and currently undeveloped. And then we have the CarMax dealership next to the Santiam Cinema. The property immediately to the east is a current auto zone retail use, and the proposed annexation is in order to accommodate an expansion of that building. The subject property is single-family residential, as are most of the properties on Mart and The surrounding properties to the east are designated commercial, to the south are designated commercial, and there are some areas of multifamily to the north as well. Marion County zoning of single-family residential applies to those properties on MART. To the north, we have Marion County multiple family residential and commercial, and to the east, City of Salem CR retail commercial, and to the south, the large properties general commercial. Proposed comprehensive plan designation applies to the entire property, and that would be commercial. And the proposed zoning also applies to the entire property. It's only 0.42 acres, so quite small. We didn't receive comments from Southeast Salem Neighborhood Association or from citizens, and there's no homeowners association. Public Works indicated there wouldn't be a significant impact, but they did have a condition for a trip cap to ensure that. And the site-specific infrastructure and street requirements would be addressed at site plan review. Fire department had no concerns. They'll look at fire department access and water supply at time of development. Building and safety had no concerns with the proposed application. Again, staff found that the proposal met the criteria in this case. Sorry. It's a logical extension of the adjacent commercial use, and city infrastructure can be provided. It's compatible with the adjacent residential uses, subject to certain conditions that we've recommended for screening and for lighting. It addresses a need for commercial lands, and it would allow these services to be provided within walking distance of the residential development. It's a logical expansion of the existing business, and it would allow the applicant to create an orderly and clean development of a property that they've said has had some issues with trash and other things while it's been vacant. Therefore, staff recommends approval, and there are the conditions. The first is that transportation impacts from this portion of the site, just the 4.42 acre site that's subject to the annexation and comprehensive plan zone change, would be limited to maximum trips of 521 average daily vehicle trips. That a solid fence at least 6 feet in height shall be provided on the west property line, and that should be subject to vision clearance standards where it's close to the street and to driveways. And the third condition is just to make it clear that the proposed development for the property would be subject to the standards in our code for exterior lighting, just to ensure that the exterior lighting doesn't shine on the adjacent residential properties or create undue illumination. And with those conditions, staff finds that the proposal meets the standards for approval. That concludes the presentation, and I am available for questions.
Thank
Several
you.
questions.
And we do have questions lining up. So I believe Commissioner Ikas had his hand up first, and then we'll go Slater.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is just a question for perspective. We have a small property, 0.42 acres, allegedly for expansion of the existing business, AutoZone business. And staff's talking about a cap of 521. I understand the cap, but I'm trying to put the 521 in perspective. That seems, even that with a cap seems fairly large to me, but then most of my experience on the daily trips has been in the context of residential development. So I'm just trying to put that 521 in perspective for what looks like a relatively small commercial development. So this question comes from not really having a lot of experience so far in the commission with caps on commercial development. So not objecting to the cap. I'm just trying to, this is the first time it's come up for me, so I'm just trying to get some perspective on this.
Yes, Tony Martin, the Assistant City Traffic Engineer, is available to answer questions related to Public Works conditions and the trip cap.
Okay. Tony's used to me asking him questions.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Tony Martin, Assistant City Traffic Engineer. Yeah, since it's like you said, you usually see it with respect to residential, and we put a trip cap on it because it's going from like an industrial use to a multifamily use. This is a case going from single family residential to a commercial use. And so the commercial uses are higher generators per square foot. So a development that would generate like 500 daily trips is, and the way commercial development works here's how it's different than single family residential. Let me say this, is that everybody goes home. It's a predetermined trip. That's where you're going. You don't, it's not a pass by, it's not a drive-by trip. Commercial traffic most of it is pass by. They're already on the road. They see something they like, they pull into it. They're on their way somewhere else. So it's not a new trip to the system. So of those 500 trips, there's very few of them are going to be brand new to the system. And then in the peak hour, it's about, 10%. So, and this is what the cap is, it's the maximum we'll allow. So that's 50 trips in the PM peak. That's less than 1 a minute in that peak hour. And half of them are coming and half of them are going. Some are going north, some are going south. So it's not a huge impact to the transportation system.
So if I can follow up,
Sure.
I'm just trying to understand here. So the trips are on the street going by. What's that street? Is that Mart?
They're on Lancaster.
Oh, that's Lancaster. Okay.
Yeah, Lancaster is the main route, carries a lot of traffic. And so, an auto parts store is, some people make it a point to go to the auto parts store. Other people have been shopping and they go, oh, I need something at the auto parts store. So, so they're diverted.
Okay. I just never dealt with the commercial. I'm just trying to get perspective.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks.
You comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay. I believe Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Heller.
Thank you. So Pamela, can you outline for me the design differences between the requirements of commercial retail and, for example, mixed use 3?
I don't have that available right now. This is a pretty specific request to make it the same zoning as the adjacent property. So we felt that was appropriate and didn't feel in this situation that it warranted thinking about a mixed use instead. It's their written description, the statement that the applicant provided indicates that it would be primarily warehouse space for the existing store.
One more question, if I may. Is that would mixed use 3, which I think is the most auto oriented of the mixed uses, would that prohibit the applicant from pursuing what they're trying to do with that space?
Lisa, do you know that off the top of your head? Mixed use 3 is one of the new codes. So
No, this is just classified as retail. The retail is allowed in MU3.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
thanks. Thank you, Lisa.
So next was Commissioner Heller.
Thank you. I'm curious about the illumination and trying to understand from your view of this, what is the 5 candle illumination on this property? What does that mean? How far does that go out and how high does it go basically?
I don't know the specifics on that. I've never actually been in charge of measuring those, but this is just straight out of the code. So these are the requirements for exterior lighting that apply in any situation. Okay. So it's just designed to ensure that the light on the commercial side of the property is not going to create an undue impact on the residential. And then they're also providing the solid 6-foot fence for some additional attenuation of the light.
Okay, so the code then specifically says this amount of illumination.
Yes.
Okay,
And if we receive complaints, and
Right.
this is about the only time that I've ever come into contact with a person who's concerned about illumination, if they're concerned that their property has too much illumination from a nearby source, then compliance services will do measurements to determine if it's under the code limitations or if it's too much.
and you can't exceed the code limitation, excuse me, you can't restrict beyond what the code said. Is that am I understanding that right?
We didn't feel that it was necessary. We just wanted to be clear that there would be some restrictions there to help the neighbors understand that the impacts are going to be limited by development code.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Last question by Commissioner Goble.
Okay, I have two unrelated questions. So first question, so I understand that the applicant wants this rezoning for the purpose of just expanding the retail use, but theoretically with the CR zone, and I just did like a really quick search on the ITE 11th edition website with like gas station uses, and I, based on just like my preliminary, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but just my little preliminary calculations and looking through the code, like a small scale gas station would be allowed on that site. Is that right? If they decided to change the sign?
Yes, under CR it would, although that's not what we understand is going to happen there.
So, but within that zoning designation and that trip cap, they could do like I think a 4-pump fueling station, I believe.
Mr. Martin?
The site isn't big enough to accommodate a gas station because you have to get fuel trucks in and out. You have to circulate vehicles. 4/10 of an acre is just too small for a gas station with any kind of convenience market. I don't have the ITE right in front of me, but it's I do not believe a 4 fueling position or pumps would be. There's 2 fueling positions for each pump. So I don't believe that would fit under the 500 trip cap.
Any other follow-up questions, Commissioner Goble?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess I just wanted to ask just to clarify what any additional intensive uses would be under this zoning designation. And I guess my second question isn't directly related, but I'll get there. But with one thing that I want to know is when we do see a lot of these kind of spot rezones and requests for changes to the comprehensive plan map, that can be indicative of like more disjointed areas of town, or just kind of a little bit of a red flag of like maybe our idea of comprehensive planning. And I guess I want to make sure as the planning commission that we're always looking at, when we change the comprehensive plan map and when we change zoning, that we're looking at it as like, what do we want this to look like and how can we get there? And I think I think this is one area of town where it does feel disjointed, where there is that kind of single family residential backing up to like more high intensity commercial uses. And I guess I do want to kind of take a broader look at, okay, like down the road when these things are redeveloped, what do we want this area of town to look like? And I don't have any issue with them, expanding their retail use at all. But I guess I just wanted to comment on that, just because down the line, if we're wanting to see more intensive uses on that site, I guess it's maybe more of a broader comment on the way that the approach of changing the comprehensive plan map to match a specific use or to match a specific applicant's request for a specific use, rather than looking at changing the comprehensive plan map as a way of guiding the direction that development is going in the future. So I guess that's maybe more of a comment than a question, but I appreciate just kind of taking a second to think about that.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, we will move on to the applicant. Would the applicant like to speak? And you have 15 minutes.
Assuming you can hear me okay. My name is Brian Dickerson with Navix Engineering.
Yes. And your address, please?
Yes. For the record, the address is 10135 Southeast Sunnyside Road, Suite 200 in Clackamas, Oregon. We are the civil engineer working on behalf of AutoZone for this project. And I apologize, the project manager who has been working on this all along actually had a vacation plan this week from months and months ago. So I'm filling in. I'm pretty well up to speed on this portion of it. And so I'm available for any questions if need be. But I did review the staff report. I guess just to keep it brief, we agree with the recommendations, obviously, and feel it was well-written report that covered everything. So with that, I'll just leave it as a thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Give it a second for people to process. Seeing none. Do we have any follow-up questions for staff? Okay. Before I close the hearing, does the applicant have any desire for the hearing to be continued or the record to be left open?
No.
Okay. I will close the hearing and let's take a vote on the application. We have a motion.
So I will move that we adopt the staff report for the minor comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number CPC CZ 2206.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Slater, second by Heller. Comment? Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. So I will probably vote no on this, not because I don't want to see AutoZone expand. I'm glad they're expanding. I think it's in the public interest to have that space used. My concern is, and I think I'm somewhat responding to some of the same issues that maybe Commissioner Goebel is that, I'm interested in seeing this space over the long term fundamentally change from what it is today. That doesn't mean that the business needs to change, and I don't think we want to drive it out of business with the zoning change. But I think if you look at the building, that kind of structure on Lancaster is the kind of structure that we want to see go away and be replaced with a more pedestrian friendly building. Its relationship to the street on Lancaster is not what we need in the long term. My preference would be to see this as something like mixed use 3, which would accommodate what the applicant is looking for, but also allows for other activity in the future. So I just think expanding commercial retail is not the best option, given that other options would in the long term create, in my view, better public benefit while still allowing the applicant to do what he would like to do with his property. So I will vote no unless there's some interest in doing a substitute amendment to change the underlying zone. But I would certainly hope that at the end of the day, we reach a point where the applicant is allowed to pursue his business interests. Thank you.
Thoughtful comments. Any other comments for discussion? We are ready to take a vote. There's no further comments. before I call for the vote, I understand where Commissioner Slater is viewing this, and I think that it would be interesting and possibly more fluid. There are certain challenges that I still run into with city structure, whether it's zoning, land use, or building code, that are don't account for all the potential variables that we have in real life. And so I don't want to follow the traditional, I believe that there's a basic rule of application that with zoning that you tend to do it in blocks and that you don't create a patchwork of mix of zones. But I don't know if that theory is necessarily correct, and that this way of layering from a major roadway like Lancaster going back to the homes that are to the west on Mart might benefit from having a mix of zones there that allows a progression of types of buildings. But I feel pretty comfortable with the application that was presented as far as the uses and the length of term that building would probably be there. With new storage added, I see a useful life going forward of another 35 plus years, that at that time it's entirely likely that that property is being rezoned anyways. But I would give credit to the thought that Commissioner Slater put into this, and the specific call out to the mixed use 3 zone that does allow that automotive use as a creative solution. So I see Commissioner Fott's hand is up. Love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. I wanted to just, I think, echo that. And is there an opportunity to adjust it then and have that be an MU3 zone? Or what's the process for?
We would need to take a vote on the motion that's in front of us, which is just the application as it's written. That would need to get voted down, and then there would need to be a motion, a new motion made with a different zone description, and then that would get voted on.
Because I think that, and Commissioner Goebel certainly stated this very well, in that there is, I think we do have this responsibility to make sure that we're not approaching this with this sort of single property approach where it's getting changed piecemeal, and a zone like that would still allow the use that the applicant's intended use while still allowing for flexibility. So yeah, I just wanted to just agree with that sentiment.
Commissioner Slater, you have your hand up, and then Commissioner Ekus was next.
Thank you. So, Acting President Levin, is it possible for another member of the commission to make a friendly amendment to the motion that then I can accept?
I will let Lisa speak, because we've gone.
That put you on the spot there.
We've gone back and forth on that structure in the past. So
yeah, we don't do friendly amendments, but somebody could make an actual amendment to the motion. You can have a motion and you can have an amendment.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to vote down the first motion. 2 things I want to clarify. MU3 is not a zone that exists, does not exist yet. So I don't know about a motion to apply a zone that doesn't exist today. Also, there's no MU3 proposed anywhere near this property. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware. It's all CR around it. It's not an MU3 area. It's not proposed to be MU3. You could still want it to be MU3, and that's fine. I'm just letting you know that's not what we've done in our Salem, the area between State Street and Highway 22 on Lancaster, which is where this is located, is not being redesignated or rezoned. It's
Okay.
staying commercial retail.
That's helpful for me. Thank you.
Commissioner Ekus?
Yeah, I just want to address process here, and I think Lisa touched on it. The last meeting, we had this discussion where we ended up voting. The idea was to vote an amendment down so that we could then propose an amendment that we thought all would pass. And it put people in an awkward position. Michael, I think, had to vote a certain way in order to allow for reconsideration. And I'm not sure that's the proper process. Most of my rules of order, which have been under two different, Robert's Rules of Order, and the legislature operates under Mason's Rules of Order. But my understanding is that if you make a main motion, someone can make an amendment to that main motion. So that you then can
that is
vote
what
the
I just
amendment.
said. Yes.
Yeah,
I
and
think at the
that's
last
what-
meeting, there was already an amendment. And so you couldn't make another amendment because that would have been
okay.
3 motions. I think
I
that's where the
didn't recall
confusion-
there already being an amendment.
Yeah,
but-
I think there was the original amendment last time was to like approve staff recommendation. And then there was an amendment and then there was discussion and it was like, oh, we want a different amendment. So yeah, this time there's just the main motion, which I think is staff recommendation to approve.
Good.
The
So
CR.
then to
So somebody
Commissioner,
could make a motion to amend it.
yeah,
Yes.
to Commissioner Fott's point, someone could make an emotion
Yes.
to amend the original motion. All right, I just wanted to
Absolutely.
clear that up because
Yeah.
I got last meeting,
Yeah.
I guess, confused me because normal procedure is you make a main motion. Then if you want to amend that motion, you make a motion to amend and you vote on that before the main motion. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I get confused too. I mean, even the conversation about the future zones coming in with our Salem, I was referencing mixed use 3 as if it potentially existed already today. But the reality is that it's a theoretical and that we only have one, I think, mixed use, and that doesn't have anything to do with automotive. That's an existing zone today. Commissioner Slater and then Commissioner Fott.
Thank you. I will just recognize Lisa's comment, and I think we've, as you said, Commissioner Levin, that mixed use 3 does not exist today. So I was probably remiss in offering that as a potential option for this application. So thank you both for clarifying that. I will be voting yes then.
Commissioner Fott?
I actually had the same comment as Commissioner Slater, now that that's been clarified. So thank you.
Well, if there are no further comments, I would say we call for a vote. Aye if you're in favor, nay if you're opposed. Shelby, would you call the vote?
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Ekus?
Aye.
Commissioner Fott?
Aye.
Commissioner Goebel?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
So the motion passes and we get to move on to the next agenda item. Special orders of business, and we have none. We have no information reports. Public comment on other agenda items. And I'm sorry, I actually skipped item 3 in the beginning of the hearing with my lack of practice at being acting president. But we did, just for the record, we did not have anyone signed up for any public testimony at this hearing for non-related items. And administrators reports. Lisa.
Yes, thank you. I'll talk about our Salem. It is on the council agenda for deliberations at their next meeting next Monday, July 11th. So fingers crossed that they'll vote and get through that in one meeting. At the last council meeting, Eunice and the team were presented an award for their outreach. They won an award from the state, from DLCD, from the Citizen Involvement Committee. It's called the ACE Award, Achievement in Community Engagement. for their work with youth and underrepresented populations on our Salem. So that was presented to them virtually at the meeting to the entire division, but really to Eunice and Austin. So that's exciting. Very proud of that work. And the only other update is we canceled the July 19th meeting for Planning Commission because we do not have any items. And I think it's too early for us to know about the first one in August. Right, Shelby?
We do have an appeal of a subdivision coming on August 2nd.
Not too early to know. There we go. We will have a meeting on August 7th. A very exciting appeal. I forgot about that.
August 2nd. Sorry,
Okay.
I might have said that a little weird.
No, I probably said it weird. So those are my updates. That's all I have. I think Commissioner Slater had said he was holding a question for me, though.
He was, and I also have a question about that hearing that went to City Council and was coming back to us. Do we know when we're going to see that?
Yeah, the applicant is still, I guess, working on their proposal. I know that they put something together. They were having meetings with the neighborhood association. They were wanting to try to get neighborhood support before they came back to the city. And I know they were working on their traffic study again and doing new counts now that Costco opened. So they haven't picked a date. They haven't submitted anything formally to us and asked us to schedule another hearing. So there's no 120 days because it's a comp plan change. So it's really on their timeline and when they get that together. So
okay. All right.
Keep you posted.
Commissioner Slater.
Thanks. So Lisa, I'm interested in getting your opinion on what we can do at the Planning Commission and in terms of kind of the authority that the city has to try and spur redevelopment or development that is a little bit more pedestrian friendly, a little bit more street friendly, without being too coercive to businesses who want to expand. And I think AutoZone for me was a great example. Because again, while I'm glad they have a successful business, I don't want to curb that. When I look at that building, I think that is kind of where urban planning went wrong. And you know, we don't want to impose the requirement on a business that they demolish and rebuild themselves simply because they want to add a warehouse. But on the other hand, I do think we want to try and take opportunities where we can to create the situation where at least down the road, we have a more pedestrian friendly, more urban design experience. And I think I raised earlier the question of, what was it? The marijuana shop that went in on the corner of Commercial. That to me looked like another great opportunity to kind of rebuild that particular area. So what are your thoughts on how we can get there over the long run?
Yeah, well, I mean, one is, you said you don't, my experience has been if the rules don't make people do it, they don't do it, like, period, right? It's very rare that someone comes in and they really want to do what we would call like good pedestrian friendly design, either because they don't have that vision or they're a national retailer and they have their, you know, this is what we do everywhere kind of thing, or they're just really, really stuck as a business person on people need to be able to park right in front of my store and no one's going to shop here. Like that's like, we hear that a lot. And also I don't need any trees because it will block my sign. And, you know, just kind of things where we're like, no, but you have to do trees, you have to do. And so they're thinking of it from a different perspective maybe than us. And so really you have to have the rules that forces it and requires it. But then what we try to do is make the rules in the areas, for example, that we are rezoning to, like, say MU1 or MU2, there are uses, building structures that don't meet those standards. And so we've tried to say, well, you can obviously continue the way you are. You can do small additions, small improvements. There's never going to be a requirement for you to like tear down your whole building, right? I mean, that the city can't do that. But we could say, like, not to pick on AutoZone, but thinking of a building that looks that way, and they have a, you know, room to build behind, if they had a zone that said you can only build buildings by the street, then instead of building an addition in the back, they would have to build the addition in the front, maybe move the parking lot to the back, right? So it wouldn't necessarily mean that they have to tear down their whole building. It would probably be more expensive than what they're planning to do today. and they would dislike it. So beyond that, I think it's the only other thing the city can do is provide financial incentives. So I think people think about Broadway as a really good example of like mixed use can happen. And they're like, see, it just happened. But of course, it didn't just happen. The city bought all the properties, tore down the buildings, cleaned up the contamination, consolidated the parcels, created an urban renewal area, put out an RFP for developers, and then created a mixed use zone that had requirements that the buildings looked that way, and then gave them grants to help them build the buildings. And people are like, see how that just happened? And it was like, 20 years of work by the city. So that's why when we think about a place like State Street, where we've done the zoning, and if the bond passes, we'll have money for the street to be improved. And then we're also thinking about what kind of financial incentives can we give the property owners or developers to like get them over the hurdle to invest. And then they'd have the zoning that would be in place to make it all happen. So it takes a lot of work. So whenever anything happens organically, it's kind of amazing when it's like, oh, they just decided to put that building up by the street. That's crazy. Or they decided to do like a plaza in the front. Good on them. Maybe they had a really great architect, or they, saw another part of town they wanted to emulate. But it's pretty rare if the zoning doesn't require it that you would get it. And then the street, I guess I would say the street, because people they can't buy into the vision of having a very pedestrian oriented building when the street is like a super wide, kind of scary, almost highway where people are speeding. And it's just like, you can't even imagine wanting to sit next to it. You don't want to sit outside and have coffee because it's too loud and scary and there's no separation or street, it's just not inviting. So people can't buy into that. Why do I want to put my building way up there? That's terrible. So I think improving the streets.
And since we are a little bit pinpointing AutoZone, I will say that I drove by there recently, coincidentally, and they have some pretty nice screening landscape.
Yeah.
So if you are on a zippy overbuilt road, that is not a bad strategy. So I will acknowledge AutoZone for that.
Yeah, it's funny. I checked them out on Street View when Pamela was writing the report, and I was also impressed with their landscaping and the state of it, because many places put in the landscaping and they don't pay to upkeep it or water it over time. So and I know they've been there for a while, so I too thought it looked very nice.
Any other comments for good of the order?
Oh, that would be me. That would be me if we moved on to the good of the order.
Oh, I think yes, because Lisa, that was your reports concluded. Yeah. So comments for good of the order. Commissioner Ekus threw his hand up.
Thank you. Piggybacking on what Lisa said about the award, I just wanted to call attention to a story I saw in late June 21st from Coin TV about Salem being determined one of the best run cities in America. People might agree or disagree with the conclusion, but it was from a Wallet Hub, a personal finance site that compared 150 of the largest US cities based on their operating efficiency. And Salem came in 18th among the 150 as one of the best operated cities in the country. So just wanted to call attention to that study. Don't know whether anyone would agree with the validity of it or not, but I thought it was interesting that Salem got determined to be one of the better highest ranked cities in the country based on operating efficiency.
Well, if you've got the site for that, I'm sure Lisa would love to have that little bit of information to share with people when they're complaining about some of the development standards that people are having to go through. And she could say, no, look at where we are. We're so much better than everybody
I haven't
else.
looked up I haven't actually gone to the Wallet Hub site, but I did go to I caught it on a Coin TV.
The city manager sent it to all the city employees. So yes, but I hadn't thought of sending it to people when they complain. So maybe I will do that.
Commissioner Slater.
Thanks. Since we're now at a different part of the agenda here, I'm interested in figuring out how we continue this conversation on the Planning Commission about what I think are two very common tensions, which is how we ensure that we have, the flexibility for businesses to pursue and be successful, which I think, Commissioner Levin, you've often articulated as we kind of wrestle with some of these issues around design requirements and my particular interest, which is that we kind of move the design forward in a more pedestrian-friendly urban environment in a way that isn't too coercive. I haven't heard a lot of options other than throwing money at it, other than coercion. But I'd be very interested if we as a commission could figure out, or at least have a conversation outside of an application on how we might move in this direction of creating a planning environment that is more design friendly, longer term, while still being, to the extent possible, kind of non-coercive for our applicants. So I would just be interested in figuring out how we do that. I don't have a specific agenda or process on that, but I'd be interested to know if other commissioners are willing or interested in engaging in that type of conversation. Thank you.
Any thought? Anybody? I know the procedure for formalizing historically was that a subcommittee would be formed. And so like Commissioner Slater, you would make a motion to create a subcommittee and then wrangle in at least one other planning commissioner. You'd have meetings and formalize a statement that would then get presented, and we would at the the president's update to city council, it could be presented then, or there could be a special request and it would be moved through Lisa and sent to city council as far as a formal document suggesting or recommending or whatever the subcommittee came up with, and then basically was presented to the commission and we vote on it. The last subcommittee that we had, other than like the joint committee between city council and planning commission on the our Salem project, which I was one of the members that sat on that committee, was Commissioner McKinley's flag subcommittee. And he had to vote, and we voted him a subcommittee to study the flag. And I think Commissioner Pollock helped him on it. I can't remember if anybody else was a member on that, and just helped him with the process and the votes and got it moved forward to, where it ended up going all the way to city council reviewing. And I don't know if we ever did, if they picked the final flag on that or not, but that was like the last time. And I remember when I first came on as a junior, there were a couple of subcommittees stuff working through ideas like this to see if it would get enough support to, make a formal recommendation to council. Commissioner Fott?
I think that would be something worth exploring, so that we can start to put out a more maybe cohesive message or approach to how we try and implement some of these things in a more proactive way, rather than simply reacting to applicant requests.
Well, with the hearing schedule, we can also, I know, opt to have a commission meeting like on the upcoming 19th. We could say we want to have one, and it's just going to be a work session to talk through this idea. So we can always do that if, maybe people think over the process and the idea, and then the next meeting during comments, we can discuss what people what direction, if Commissioner Slater, if you want to like formalize a subcommittee, or if we want to do this as just a group and commit to a day of talking about it. I definitely have a couple of ideas on it. So I have a few comments I think we're sharing. Does everyone want to noodle on this? And then we discuss it next meeting on kind of a direction on how to move forward?
That would certainly work for me. I don't think we need to make a decision today. It probably doesn't make sense to do a lot of thinking until we know the fate of the Salem project.
Yeah.
So we don't keep imposing zones that don't exist.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, and then, President Griggs was gone, and I think other boards that I've sat on, if there was conversation of a subcommittee and you were absent in that meeting, then automatically you were named as one of those committee members. I think we'll tell her that when she gets back.
It's called being gold.
We should immediately move to create the subcommittee and appoint Shane president. Is that their chair is what I'm hearing? That's right. I like that thought. All right. I will probably then bring a motion to create a subcommittee back to our next meeting. And then perhaps the thing to do would be to have some subcommittee meetings and then have a work session or planning hearing like you suggested, Commissioner Levin. That sounds like maybe the right order of things. So we have something to digest and discuss rather than a meeting before we've had a chance to think it all through.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? I think that's our last agenda item. We can count this planning commission meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank
See you all in
you.
August.
Thank you.